Hey everyone, and welcome to my video. So, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that African Americans are only 13% of the population, yet we commit most of the crimes. Well, first of all, I don't believe there were only 13% of the population. I believe that we are maybe even double that, two and a half times that. And one of the reasons I believe that is because in the 1800s, we were already 18% of the population. During slavery, many of the southern states in America already had, by the 1800s, 1820s, they already had half of their population filled with slaves. So South Carolina even had more than half of their population that were enslaved. And there were 70 to 90% of some of their counties that were filled with slaves. So African American slaves. So there's more of us, I do believe, here in America than what they're telling us. What started to happen, one of the reasons that slavery was abolished is because the slaves realized that they were the majority in a lot of the slave states and they began to revolt. Nat Turner was not the first of his kind. There were many Nat Turners before him, and there were many after. He was one of the most intense, but there were all kinds of slave revolts happening in the South. And the North was afraid to go down into the South and conduct business because they were afraid that they would be massacred. So the North said, hey, get rid of the slavery in the South and send them back to Africa. And they actually sent some small groups back to Africa, to Liberia. And in Liberia now, white people cannot have citizenship and they cannot own land in Liberia. And there was a small group of us that actually were sent back there, but majority of us stayed here in America and still stayed in those southern states. But in 1820, we were 18% of the population. Now we're down to 13%. I believe that these people do that because they understand that there is strength in numbers. And if we tell you that you're only 13% of the population and that there are other races that have more people, maybe six or seven times more than you, that'll prevent you from having those slave revolts that your ancestors had in the past. So, but anyway, there is strength in numbers, and to tell us that we're less, that we really are the minority, that is also playing on your it's basically a form of warfare, playing on your emotions and your mental health state, because you feel like you're the smallest group, the most unheard group, the most overlooked group, and really your numbers are more than what they're saying. Historically, black women have always had more children than white women, and if you look into Africa, they are the only demographic that's actually having more children than anybody else on the planet. So they're having enough children to sustain themselves. Everybody else is having less children and they're slowly dying off. So let's get into this. I believe that some people are smaller in number than they're being told, and others are more in number than they're being told. Why do you think there's such a fight to get rid of other races, even if they came under asylum or came into America immediately applying for citizenship and trying to do things the right way? There's still a fight to get rid of all those people. Why? The reason that we're here today is to talk about African Americans and whether or not they commit the most crime in America. Now, people regurgitate that and say African Americans commit most of the crime, but they usually get that information from a friend or a family member and don't look up the information themselves. But I'm here to provide you with that information. So, this information was taken from the United States Federal Bureau of Investigations, or the FBI, and these stats are from 2023. The reason why I could not produce stats from 2024 is because they're not broken down by demographic yet. So they're only, the number is available, but not the demographic. Of course, for 2025, we're still in 2025, so we can't bring those statistics. But when they're available, if you want them, I can bring them as well. Now, these statistics don't vary too much from 2022, but these statistics are only arrests and not convictions. We'll talk about the convictions toward the end of the video. All right, so according to the FBI in 2023, white people were arrested 9,116 times for rape. They made up 69% of those arrests. Black people were arrested 3,521 times, making up 26.7% of those arrests. Now, when we bring in our juveniles, we see that white juveniles were arrested 1,461 times, and they made up 69.6% of arrests for rape. And black juveniles were arrested 569 times, making up 27.1% of those arrests. Theft or larceny. White people were arrested 290,351 times, or 61.7% of the time, for theft or larceny. Black people were arrested 162,080 times, making up 34.4% of those arrests. Car theft. White people were arrested for car theft 29,406 times, making up 55.3% of the arrests. Black people were arrested 22,107 times, and they made up 41.5% of the arrests. All right, when it comes to crime on school grounds, white people were arrested 71.1% of the time, and black people were arrested 27.4% of the time. When we're discussing child pornography, white people were arrested 13,414 times for child pornography. They made up 69.3% of those arrests. And black men or black people were arrested 6,645 times, making up 27.2% of those arrests. You know, I've heard some black men say that white women are better mothers than black women. Well, let's look at these statistics, shall we? White people were arrested 16,181 times for child abuse. They made up 66.2% of the child abuse arrests. Black people were arrested 4,888 times for child abuse, making up 25.3% of those arrests. Keep in mind that CPS is called twice as often on black women as they are on white women, especially by the hospitals. Many black women have CPS called on them because they're poor and they can't always afford to take care of the children in the ways that the children need. And it's not necessarily physical, mental, or sexual abuse, it's simply poverty. For burglary, white people were arrested 48,032 times, making up 59.7% of those arrests. Black people were arrested 29,692 times, making up 36.9% of those arrests. Arson. Arson has never really been an issue in the black community, so didn't even know we were up to 24.6% with arson. But anyway, according to the FBI statistics, white people were arrested 5,439 times for arson, which made up 71.3% of those arrests. Black people were arrested 1,876 times for arson. When it comes to hate crimes, I'm not really sure why our percentages are so high for black people, 21.3%, because I don't know too many black people or too many instances where black people have committed hate crimes. But anyway, according to the FBI, white people committed hate crimes 56.1% of the time, and black people committed hate crimes 21.3% of the time. When it comes to fraud, white people were arrested 31,181 times, making up 61.5% of those arrests, and black people were arrested 17,735 times, making up 35% of the arrests. All right, so when we're talking about murder and manslaughter, black people were arrested 4,813 times in 2023 for murder or manslaughter. White people were arrested 2,825 times in 2023 for murder or manslaughter. So for this particular crime, it is highest among black people. Please keep in mind that black people unalive each other. White people unalive each other. So really, there's no such thing as black on black crime because most crimes are committed by people of the same race toward people of the same race. So there's a such thing as white on white crime, Asian on Asian crime. That's just the way it is because we live in such close vicinities to each other. These crimes happen in low class neighborhoods. They happen in the hood. They happen in gang infested areas. These types of murders among black people, they don't happen in areas where it's upper class, upscale areas, not even in middle class black neighborhoods, not even in lower class, low to middle black neighborhoods. Most of these murders are concentrated in the hood. Now, this one is a little off to me. For assault, white people were arrested 118,866 times. They made up 52.4% of the arrest. Black people were arrested 98,013 times, making up 43.2% of the arrest. But then they said Hispanics were arrested 65,113 times, and they made up 26.2% of the arrests. What's crazy about this is that the total arrest should calculate to 100%. Why is there a calculation of 122%? That means somebody's numbers were inflated. Gee, I wonder who. For disorderly conduct, white people were arrested 128,923 times, making up 68.4%, and then black people were arrested 49,554 times, making up 26.3% of those arrests. Drug abuse. Now, drug crimes also fall into the category of drug abuse. So, white people made up 70% of the arrest. 499,860 times they were arrested. For black people, they made up 27.3% of the arrests, and they were arrested 194,750 times. Human trafficking. So, white people were arrested 58% of the time, black people were arrested 20% of the time, and Hispanic people were arrested 18% of the time. Tax evasion. White people were arrested 31,181 times, black people 17,735 times. Prostitution. White people were arrested 6,346 times, making up 51.7% of the arrests, and black people were arrested 4,970 times, making up 40.5% of the arrests. Felonies. White people were arrested 336,027 times, making up 61.9% of the arrests. Black people were arrested 189,596 times, making up 34.9% of the arrests. Domestic violence. White people were arrested 16,181 times, making up 66.2% of the overall arrests. Black people were arrested 6,645 times, making up 27.2% of the arrests. Kidnapping. White people were arrested for kidnapping 16,191 times in 2023. They made up 66.2% of those arrests. Black people were arrested 6,645 times, making up 27.2% of the arrests. Cybercrime. White people were arrested 31,181 times, 61.5% of the arrests. Black people arrested 17,735 times, making up 35% of the arrests. Vandalism. White people were arrested 68,743 times, making up 61.7% of the arrests. Black people arrested 37,629 times, making up 33.8% of the arrests. Misdemeanors. White people were arrested 621,410 times, 66% of the time. Black people arrested 276,050 times, 29.3% of the time. Police officers heavily police black neighborhoods at a rate of 3.6 times more than white neighborhoods. In some black neighborhoods, it's even 10 times more. And don't say they police our neighborhoods because we're more likely to commit the crimes, because as we've looked at the stats, we see that's not true. Now, let's look at all the statistics, compile them together, and determine the percentage of people in jail. Well, in 2022, which holds the most recent stats on the topic, for every 100,000 black people in America, 1,826 were incarcerated. For every 100,000. Now, for every 100,000 white residents in America, only 392 were incarcerated. So we just looked at the arrests, but the ones that were actually convicted are mostly black. You know, a lot of people will look at that statistic that black men are the ones mostly incarcerated, and they'll say, see, told you, black people commit most of the crimes. But we just found out that's not the case. Now, we just looked at all those stats that told you who committed most of the violent crimes in America, but they're less likely to go to jail, and when they do, they get less jail time. Then, to make themselves feel better, they blame most of the crime on you. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos. Love you guys.